The silent partner. I never thought I'd be the person who gets screwed over by their best friend. But here I am, typing this out at 3 a.m. while nursing my third whiskey, trying to make sense of how my life imploded in just 72 hours. I guess that's why they say the brightest flames burn the quickest. And man, our startup was burning bright. Let me start from the beginning. The foundation. 5 years ago, Alex and I were just two college dropouts with a dream and a half-baked app idea. We met in our sophomore year computer science class at UCLA. I was the code guy, could build anything, but couldn't sell water to someone dying of thirst. Alex was the opposite, charismatic, connected, could convince investors to open their wallets with just a smile and a handshake. I still remember the night Local Lens was born. It was during midterms week, and we were pulling an all-nighter at the 24-hour cafe near campus. I was complaining about how hard it was to find people with similar interests in a new neighborhood after my landlord had forced me to move across town. There's got to be a better way than just randomly bumping into people, I said, rubbing my eyes after staring at code for 6 straight hours. Alex looked up from his economics textbook, that spark in his eyes I'd come to recognize as his idea face. What if we built something that connects people based on where they actually go, not just where they live, he said. Like, you walk into a coffee shop and can see threads from everyone who's been there before. Hyperlocal Reddit meets Nextdoor, but without all the drama and Karen complaints. We spent the next 3 hours sketching out the concept on cafe napkins, completely forgetting about our exams. By morning, we had the basic framework for what would become Local Lens. 2 weeks later, we both dropped out, despite my parents' horror. My Korean immigrant father didn't speak to me for 6 months after that decision. You throw away opportunity we came to America for, he said during our last conversation before the silence. For what? To play with computer games. Alex's situation wasn't much better. His parents were academics who viewed entrepreneurship as a less respectable path than finishing his degree. But we had each other, and that was enough. We moved into a tiny one-bedroom apartment in Koreatown, converting the living room into our office. I slept on a futon next to my desk. Alex took the bedroom, but paid slightly more rent to compensate. The app was my brainchild, but Alex helped refine it into something marketable. Local Lens, a hyperlocal social platform that connected people based on specific locations and interests. I spent 8 months building the prototype while working night shifts at a data center. Alex handled the business plan and investor deck, working as a bartender to keep us afloat. Our first big break came when Alex managed to get us into a pitch competition at a local tech hub. We didn't win, but a junior partner at Venture West was in the audience and liked our concept enough to arrange a proper pitch meeting. I'll never forget how nervous I was. I'd thrown up twice that morning, and my hands were shaking so badly I could barely demo the app. But Alex was in his element. He painted a vision so compelling that even I, who had helped create it, was seeing Local Lens in a new light. By some miracle, we secured $500,000 in seed funding. It wasn't huge by Silicon Valley standards, but for two broke 21-year-olds, it might as well have been $500 million. We quit our jobs, moved into a dingy WeWork in downtown LA, and lived on ramen and Red Bull for the next 2 years. There were countless nights when I coded until my vision blurred, fueled by nothing but determination and energy drinks. Alex worked his network tirelessly, getting us into tech events, setting up meetings with potential partners, and recruiting our first employees. We complemented each other perfectly. Or so I thought. The grind was real, but we were living our dream. Local Lens hit 10,000 users within 6 months, then 100,000 by the end of the first year, then 1 million by the end of year 2. We expanded the team to 15 people. Last month, we were finalizing our Series B funding, $12 million that would take us to the next level. That's when everything went to hell. The first cracks. Looking back, there were warning signs I chose to ignore. It started about a year ago, right after our series of funding round. We'd secured $2.5 million and were finally paying ourselves reasonable salaries. No more instant ramen for dinner or sleeping on the office couch. Alex began changing in subtle ways. He swapped his hoodies and jeans for designer clothes, moved out of our shared apartment into a luxury high-rise in downtown LA, and started hanging out with a different crowd, other founders who'd made it, venture capitalists, the tech elite of Southern California. At first, I was happy for him. Alex had always been more social than me, and his networking skills were a huge asset to Local Lens. If he wanted to enjoy some of the success we'd earned, who was I to judge? But then came the disagreements about the company's direction. I wanted to keep focusing on the user experience, making the platform more responsive to what our community wanted. Alex began pushing for more aggressive monetization, paid features, premium accounts, more intrusive advertising. "We can't run a charity forever, Ryan," he'd say during our strategy meetings. "Investors want to see revenue, not just user growth." He wasn't wrong exactly. We did need a sustainable business model, but something about the way he discussed our users as data points and monetization opportunities rather than people fell off. This wasn't the Alex who'd sat with me in that cafe drafting our mission to build technology that brings communities together. Then there were the new people he brought in. Melissa, our new marketing director, came from a major social media company known for its invasive data practices. Trevor, the growth hacker Alex hired without consulting me, had previously worked at a company shut down for violating privacy laws. They were undeniably talented, but their values seemed misaligned with what we'd built. "We need experienced people who know how to scale," Alex said when I raised concerns. "We can't keep running this like a college project if we want to compete with the big players." The real troubles began 6 months ago, when Alex started having private investor meetings that I wasn't invited to. Our CFO, Jamie, one of our first hires and someone I trusted implicitly, kept giving me strange looks whenever I mentioned future plans. The development team seemed on edge whenever Alex walked into the room. One night, working late, I overheard 2 engineers talking in the break room. "I don't feel good about the new data collection protocols," one said. "It's not what I signed up for." "Yeah, but what choice do we have?" the other replied. "It's all part of the acquisition strategy." Acquisition strategy? This was the first I'd heard of any acquisition. When I casually asked Alex about it the next day, he laughed it off. "Just exploring all options for growth," he said. "Nothing concrete." You know how it is, always good to have multiple paths forward. I believed him because I wanted to. Because the alternative meant my best friend, my partner, the person I'd built this dream with, was keeping secrets that affected both our futures. The betrayal. Last Friday, I came into the office early to prepare for our board meeting. The cleaning crew was still there, and the office was quiet. I headed to the kitchen for coffee before settling in at my desk. That's when I overheard Alex on a call in the conference room. The door was slightly ajar. "The paperwork's almost complete," he was saying, his voice hushed but excited. "We'll have Ryan sign the new terms at the board meeting today. He has no idea that the clause transfers controlling interest to me and the new investors." My blood ran cold. I stood there, coffee forgotten in my hand, as Alex continued. "Look, Ryan's brilliant with code, but he's a liability for scaling. Too idealistic, too user-focused when we need to monetize. Once the papers are signed, we'll give him a nice exit package and a fancy title with no real power. The chief technical advisor, or something that sounds important but isn't." There was a pause as whoever was on the other end spoke. "No, trust me, he'll sign," Alex replied with a chuckle. "Ryan doesn't read the fine print, never has. He trusts me to handle the business side. By the time he realizes what's happened, it'll be too late." Another pause. "Of course I feel bad," Alex said, his voice dropping. "He's my friend. But this is business, and this deal with Clearview is our ticket to the big leagues. Ryan's vision for Local Lens is too small, too principled. We need to move fast and break things if we want to compete. He'd never agree to the data harvesting Clearview wants, which is why we need to remove him from the decision-making process." I quietly backed away, my mind racing. The betrayal cut deep. This wasn't just business. This was my best friend planning to push me out of my own company. I'd trusted Alex with everything. We'd crashed on each other's couches when we couldn't make rent. I'd helped him through his breakup with Megan, the girl he'd dated for 3 years. I was the best man at his wedding last year, for Christ's sake. But I guess friendship means nothing when there's $12 million on the table. I went straight to Jamie's office, hoping our CFO would give me answers. To my surprise, she looked relieved when I told her what I'd overheard. "I've been trying to figure out how to tell you," she admitted, pulling out a folder from her locked drawer. "Alex has been setting this up for months. These are copies of everything I could gather." The documents told the full story. Alex had been meeting with a rival tech company, Clearview Analytics, which wanted our user data and proprietary algorithm. The deal would make Alex and the new investors rich, while leaving me with essentially nothing. They'd structured it so I'd still be employed, preventing me from claiming wrongful termination, but with zero control. LocalLens would become a data mining operation, harvesting information from our users to power Clearview's marketing algorithms. Everything we had built, the community, the trust, the technology that was supposed to bring people together, would be corrupted to track and monetize people's behavior. The board meeting was in 2 hours. I had 120 minutes to save 5 years of my life's work. The count to move. If this had happened even a year earlier, I would have confronted Alex directly. Yelled, pleaded, tried to appeal to our friendship. But spending 5 years in the startup world had taught me something important. In business, emotion is a liability. Instead of a dramatic confrontation, I went into problem-solving mode. The same mindset I used when debugging a particularly nasty piece of code. First, I needed more information. Then, a strategy. I called the one person who could help, Priya Sharma, our former legal counsel who'd left to start her own practice 6 months ago. Priya had always been straight with us, sometimes uncomfortably so. I still remembered how she'd insisted we clarify our partnership agreement in ways that had seemed unnecessary at the time. "Even best friends need legal boundaries," she'd said. "Especially best friends." Alex had laughed it off, but eventually agreed to the terms Priya suggested, if only to humor her. Now, those terms might be my only leverage. Priya met me at a coffee shop down the street within 30 minutes of my call. She was as sharp as ever, dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit despite the short notice, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. "I've been waiting for this call," she said after we'd ordered. I left because I could see the direction things were heading. Alex started excluding me from key meetings about 6 months ago. After reviewing the documents Jamie had given me, she looked up with that sharp gaze that made her such a formidable attorney. "You're in a tough spot, but not checkmate yet," she said. "Remember that backup contingency we built into your original partnership agreement? The one Alex thought was unnecessary." I vaguely recalled a clause Priya had insisted on, something about intellectual property, rights reverting to the original creator under certain conditions. It had seemed like legal overcaution at the time. "That clause gives you leverage," Priya explained. "Your original code, the algorithm that powers LocalLens, is still protected as your personal IP with a limited license to the company. If there's a change in control without your consent, that license becomes revocable. In simple terms, if they push me out, I could take my algorithm with me. And without that algorithm, LocalLens was just another social app in an overcrowded market. But I need proof they're trying to force me out," I said. Priya smiled. "That's why you're going to record the board meeting." She spent the next hour coaching me on exactly what to say and do. We prepared a strategy that would expose Alex's plan without burning down the company I'd worked so hard to build. By the time we finished, I felt a strange calm. The hurt and betrayal were still there, but now I had a path forward. "One more thing," Priya said as we were leaving. "Whatever happens in that meeting, remember that this isn't just about you and Alex anymore. You have employees who depend on LocalLens for their livelihoods, and users who trust you with their data. Don't lose sight of that." Her words stuck with me as I walked back to the office, reminding me why this fight mattered. It wasn't just about my wounded pride or feeling betrayed. It was about protecting something that mattered. The confrontation. Walking into that board meeting was like entering a room where everyone knew a secret except me. Alex greeted me with his usual bro hug and million-dollar smile, completely unaware that I'd heard his true plans. Our 3 board members were there: Jordan from Venture West, who'd given us our first break, Maria, who'd led our Series A round, and Terrence, an industry veteran we'd brought on for expertise. Alongside them were the special guests Alex had mentioned, 3 representatives from Clearview Analytics, all in crisp suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Before we get started," I said casually, placing my phone on the table, "do you mind if I record this? I've been playing with voice-to-text software for our next feature and thought this would be good test data." No one objected. Why would they? In California, you need all parties' consent to record conversations, and I'd just gotten it. What followed was the most surreal 2 hours of my life. I watched my best friend systematically sell me out, presenting the deal as a strategic partnership, while carefully glossing over the clauses that would strip me of control. He was masterful. If I hadn't known what to look for, even I would have been convinced. The Clearview CEO, a polished woman named Diana Chen, spoke eloquently about synergies and market amplification. Their CTO discussed technical integration in vague terms, careful to avoid mentioning the data harvesting that was clearly their primary goal. Through it all, I nodded, asked appropriate questions, and pretended to be excited about this new chapter for Local Lens. I could see the relief on Alex's face as the meeting progressed. He thought I was buying it. When he finally placed the documents in front of me to sign, I made a show of reading through them carefully. "Just one thing I'm not clear on," I said innocently, pointing to a paragraph buried on page 37. "Section 7.3 seems to transfer controlling interest to the new entity. That can't be right." The room went quiet. Alex's smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered. "It's just standard language for this type of strategic investment," he said smoothly. "Nothing changes in our day-to-day. You'll still be heading up product development." I nodded thoughtfully. "And my algorithm?" "The core tech." One of the Clearview execs shifted uncomfortably. Diana Chen's perfectly composed face showed a flicker of concern. Alex laughed a little too loudly. "Of course it stays with the company. That's always been the arrangement." That's when I placed Priya's folder on the table and sat back. "Actually, that's not true. And I think everyone here should understand exactly what's happening before we proceed." For the next 20 minutes, I methodically laid out everything. The secret meetings, the plan to sideline me, Clearview's intentions for our user data. I played snippets from Alex's morning phone call, watched his face transition from confident to worried to pale with anger. "This deal isn't a partnership," I concluded. "It's a hostile takeover designed to circumvent my rights as a co-founder and fundamentally change what Local Lens is. And I'm not signing off on it." The Clearview representatives looked increasingly uncomfortable. Diana Chen started whispering urgently to their legal counsel. Our board members appeared stunned, not just by the deal's true nature, but by the deception. Maria, who'd built her reputation on ethical tech investments, looked particularly furious. "Alex," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger, "is this true? Have you deliberately misrepresented this deal to the board?" Alex had recovered enough to attempt damage control. "Ryan is dramatically mischaracterizing what's happening here. Yes, there would be some restructuring, but it's for the good of the company. Local Lens needs to evolve beyond its current limitations if it's going to compete at scale." "Limitations like user privacy?" I asked. "Like building technology that serves people instead of exploiting them?" "Don't be naive," Alex snapped, his friendly facade finally cracking. "This is how the industry works. Nobody succeeds at scale without monetizing data. Clearview is offering us resources we couldn't dream of otherwise." "They're offering you resources," I corrected. "This deal is structured to push me out and turn Local Lens into something completely different from what we built." Diana Chen finally spoke up. "Perhaps we should take a brief recess to discuss privately." "No need," I said, gathering my materials. "This meeting is over. As per Section 12.4 of our partnership agreement, any material change to the company's ownership structure requires unanimous consent from both founders. I do not consent." "You're making a huge mistake," Alex said, his voice cold. This deal is the best thing that could happen to Local Lens. You mean the best thing that could happen to you, I replied. But you overlook something important. This company isn't just about funding or user numbers. It's built on trust, the trust our users place in us, and the trust we place in each other. I turned to the board and the Clearview representatives. I'm not opposed to a strategic partnership that helps Local Lens grow. But any deal needs to respect the company's original mission and the contributions of everyone who built it. If you're interested in that kind of partnership, I'm happy to discuss it. Otherwise, there's nothing more to talk about. Then I stood up and walked out, half expecting security to stop me. But nobody moved. They were too stunned. The aftermath. The fallout was immediate and messy. Clearview pulled out of the deal entirely, unwilling to get involved in what their CEO diplomatically called internal governance issues. Our board called an emergency meeting without Alex or me present to determine next steps. Meanwhile, rumors spread through the company like wildfire. I hadn't intended to make the dispute public, but one of the board members must have talked. By Monday morning, everyone knew that the co-founders were at war. The team fractured along predictable lines. The old guard, those who'd been with us from the beginning, largely supported me. The newer hires, particularly those Alex had brought on, backed him. A few pragmatic souls tried to remain neutral, focused on keeping the product running while leadership imploded. For a week, the company was in limbo. Alex and I avoided each other completely, communicating only through lawyers. Priya worked tirelessly to protect my interests while trying to find a solution that wouldn't destroy Local Lens in the process. Our investors were panicking, and competitors were circling, sensing blood in the water. 2 key engineers resigned, unwilling to deal with the uncertainty. Our user growth, which had been steadily climbing for months, flatlined as we pulled back on marketing while sorting out the mess. The lowest point came when my father called. Someone had leaked the story to TechCrunch, and now my family knew about the implosion of the company I'd assured them would justify my dropping out of college. You should have gotten a degree, my father said, his accent thicker when he was upset. Business partners always betray. Family never betrays. I didn't have the heart to explain that Alex had been like family to me. That was what made the betrayal so painful. 10 days after the board meeting, when I was seriously considering whether Local Lens could survive at all, Alex texted me. We need to talk. Not as business partners. As friends. Please. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at Barney's Beanery, the dive bar where we'd celebrated our first funding round years ago. He was already there when I arrived, nursing a beer and looking like he hadn't slept in days. The charismatic, confident Alex was gone, replaced by someone who looked beaten and exhausted. I screwed up, he said simply as I sat down. I got caught up in the numbers and the status and forgot what we were building and why. You tried to steal my company, I said. My life's work. Our company, he corrected, then sighed. But yes, I convinced myself it was a necessary business move, that you were holding us back from being truly successful with your ideals about user privacy and community focus. I was wrong, and I betrayed you. There's no excuse for that. I wanted to stay angry, to tell him to go to hell. But sitting there, I remembered all the nights we'd worked until dawn, the small victories we'd celebrated, the times he'd pulled me out of coding spirals when I was ready to give up. What do you want, Alex? I asked finally. To resign properly, to apologize to the team, and to give you my shares at their original value, not what they're worth now. It's your company. It always was. I studied him, looking for the manipulation, the angle. But for the first time in months, he seemed genuine. Keep your shares, I said finally. But you're out as CEO. You can stay on as advisor if the board agrees. And you'll never have controlling interest. He looked surprised. Why would you even want me involved after what I did? Because despite everything, you helped build Local Lens. And because you're still the best at certain aspects of this business when you're not trying to screw over your partners. The rebuilding. The next month was a blur of meetings, legal documents, and difficult conversations. We restructured the company leadership. with me stepping into the CEO role and promoting Jamie to COO. Alex formally stepped down as CEO but remained on as a strategic advisor with restricted voting rights. The board insisted on bringing in an independent chairperson to mediate any future disputes, a retired tech executive named Gloria Chun, who had a reputation for uncompromising ethics and business acumen. Our first all-hands meeting after the restructuring was possibly the most uncomfortable hour of my life. Standing before the team, many of whom looked skeptical or openly hostile, I had to address what had happened and chart a path forward. "I won't pretend the last few weeks have been anything but a crisis," I began. "You all deserve better than to have your livelihoods put at risk by a conflict between the founders. For that, I apologize." Alex, to his credit, gave a sincere apology as well. He acknowledged his mistakes without excuses and pledged to support the company's original mission going forward. I could see surprise on the faces of those who'd expected him to be ousted completely. We lost some team members who were loyal to Alex and uncomfortable with the new structure. Melissa, the marketing director, left for a position at a larger tech company. Trevor, the growth hacker, followed soon after. I couldn't pretend to be sad about either departure. But rebuilding wasn't just about personnel. We had to reconsider our entire strategy. The Clearview deal had collapsed, along with the $12 million in funding it would have brought. Our existing investors were wary after the public drama. We needed to prove Local Lens was still viable. This is where Alex, in his new advisory role, actually proved valuable. He might have lost sight of our values, but he still understood the business landscape better than anyone. He helped us identify a new group of potential investors who aligned with our vision of technology that served communities rather than exploiting them. Ethical tech is becoming a market differentiator, he explained during a strategy session. After the scandals with Facebook and Google, there's real appetite for platforms that respect user privacy and agency. We can position Local Lens as the anti-Facebook. He was right. 3 months of intense pitching later, we secured $8 million in Series B funding, less than the Clearview deal would have provided, but with no strings attached that compromised our core mission. The real breakthrough came when we launched our community ownership feature, allowing users to have genuine control over their data and how it was used. This wasn't just a privacy toggle. It was a fundamental rethinking of how social platforms could work, giving users transparent choices about data sharing with actual benefits for choosing to share. The tech press, which had initially covered our co-founder drama with gleeful schadenfreude, now wrote thoughtful pieces about our novel approach. User growth, which had stalled during the crisis, began climbing again, not just recovering, but accelerating beyond our previous trajectory. 6 months after the failed board meeting, we not only survived, but emerged stronger. Our team was smaller, but more unified. Our product was clearer in its purpose. And while Alex and I would never fully trust each other again, we'd found a working relationship that capitalized on our strengths while protecting against our weaknesses. The reconciliation. The hardest part of the whole ordeal wasn't the business challenges. It was navigating my personal relationship with Alex. For 5 years, he'd been my closest friend, practically my brother. Then suddenly, he was almost a stranger, someone I interacted with carefully, always looking for hidden motives. We kept our interactions strictly professional for months. He'd offer input during strategy meetings, I'd consider it objectively, and we'd move on. No more late-night brainstorming sessions over beers, no inside jokes, no shared celebration when we hit milestones. The distance bothered me more than I wanted to admit. For all his flaws, and despite his betrayal, Alex understood parts of the Local Lens journey that no one else could. There were references and memories that only made sense to the two of us. The first crack in the ice came unexpectedly, during a demo of our new feature set. I was walking the team through the updates when a particularly nasty bug caused the entire app to crash in spectacular fashion. Before I could feel embarrassed, Alex caught my eye across the conference room and mouthed our old coding disaster catchphrase, minimum viable failure. I couldn't help laughing, and just like that, a tiny bit of our old rapport returned. A few weeks later, He stopped by my office late one evening as I was working through a complex scaling problem. "You're doing it again," he said from the doorway. "Doing what?" "That thing where you try to solve everything at once instead of breaking it down. You've been staring at the same screen for 2 hours. Your eyes are going to fall out." He was right, of course. It was a habit he'd called me out on countless times over the years. "Old habits," I said with a shrug. "Want to grab food? You need a break, and I know you haven't eaten." We ended up at the taco truck we used to frequent when we couldn't afford proper meals. Sitting on a curb with carnitas tacos, we carefully stuck to safe topics: industry news, technical challenges, mutual acquaintances. But it was the most normal interaction we'd had in months. As we were finishing, Alex said quietly, "I miss this. I miss us being friends." "I do too," I admitted. "But I don't know if we can go back to how things were." "We can't," he said immediately. "And we shouldn't. I betrayed your trust in a fundamental way. I'm not asking for things to be like they were. I'm just saying maybe we can build something new. A different kind of friendship." What would that even look like? He considered this seriously. Honest. Boundaries. No business discussions outside of the office. Maybe eventually we get to a place where we trust each other again. Maybe we don't. But I value having you in my life, Ryan, even if it's different now. It wasn't a Hollywood moment of instant forgiveness. There was no hug, no dramatic reconciliation. Just a quiet acknowledgement that what was broken couldn't be perfectly fixed, but maybe something worthwhile could still be salvaged. The lessons. That was 6 months ago. Rebuilding hasn't been easy, not the company, not our friendship, not my own confidence as a leader. But the process has taught me lessons I never would have learned if everything had gone smoothly. First, I learned that legal protections aren't just formalities. Priya's insistence on that IP clause quite literally saved the company. I've become a strong advocate for founders to protect themselves properly, especially when they're going into business with friends. Second, I discovered that crisis reveals people's true characters. Some team members I barely knew stepped up incredibly during our darkest days, while others I thought I could count on disappeared when things got tough. Jamie's loyalty in sharing those documents with me potentially risked her own position, but saved the company. She's now my most trusted executive and a close friend. Third, I realized that success changes people, sometimes for the worse, sometimes for the better. Money and power can make you forget who you are and what really matters. But they can also teach you crucial lessons if you're willing to learn them. Alex is still with the company as an advisor, though our friendship will never be what it was. Trust, once broken, doesn't fully heal. But we found a new dynamic that works: professional respect, occasional personal connection, and clear boundaries. As for LocalLens, we just hit 5 million users. Our new mission statement is painted on the wall of our slightly less dingy office: technology built on trust. It's a daily reminder of what we almost lost and what we're working to build. My father, who didn't speak to me for 6 months when I dropped out, finally came to visit the office last week. He walked around quietly, observing everything, listening to my explanations of what we do with stoic attention. At the end of the tour, he surprised me by saying, "You build good thing here, not just app community." Coming from him, that was the equivalent of a standing ovation. Looking back, I realized that what happened with Alex and LocalLens wasn't just a business crisis, it was a crossroads. We could have gone the way of so many tech companies, prioritizing growth and profit above all else, eventually becoming the very kind of platform we initially wanted to provide an alternative to. Instead, the betrayal forced us to clarify what we really stood for and build stronger protections around those values. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I hadn't overheard that call. If I'd signed those papers without reading the fine print, trusting Alex completely. By now, LocalLens would be fully absorbed into Clearview, our users' data being mined for targeted advertising, and I'd probably be working on some meaningless innovation project with no real authority. Our vision would be gone, replaced by the same profit-at-all-cost mentality that dominates most of the tech industry. Instead, we're building something different, something that matters. A platform where people genuinely connect with their communities, where privacy isn't just a marketing slogan but a foundational principle, where technology serves humans rather than exploiting them. It's not the easiest path. We've turned down partnerships that would have been lucrative but compromised our values. We've built features that prioritize user experience over monetization potential. We've been transparent about mistakes and changes in ways that sometimes made our PR team cringe. But it's working. Our user retention rate is nearly double the industry average. Local businesses are finding genuine value in connecting with their communities through our platform. And we're profitable not wildly so, but sustainably, which means we can keep building without being at the mercy of investors who might push us away from our mission. As for me, I've changed too. I'm more cautious now, more aware of the pitfalls of success and the complexities of human relationships. But I'm also more confident in my values and capabilities. I've learned that standing up for yourself doesn't mean burning everything down. Most importantly, I've learned that rebuilding is possible, even after the worst betrayal, not to restore what was, but to create something new that's stronger, because it's built on truth. If you're in the startup world or any business, really, remember this. Protect your work, know your worth, and understand that the most dangerous threats often come from those closest to you. But also know that mistakes, even terrible ones, don't have to be the end of the story. They can be the beginning of a better one. The end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible content.